Is your team like oil and water, or is it like a well-oiled machine? Does your team trust each other? Does your team tend to avoid conflict? Is there enough trust there to keep each other accountable?
Mm-hmm.
Is your team committed to one another? Today on the Value Added Podcast, Jared and I are going to do another book review. It's a classic. It's something that's been around for a while, but if it's new to you, we highly recommend it.
Yes.
It's called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and it's by Patrick Lencioni. A very short read, actually. I know, within like 3 hours or less.
Yeah. Yep. I read it in, I think, 2 sittings, maybe a couple hours each, maybe.
But very, very powerful. Now, for this episode, we don't have a lot of notes. We're just going to talk through these different 5 dysfunctions and share some of our thoughts.
It's going to be good. This is going to be good.
But you got a quote to kick us off.
Yeah, I do. So Patrick says, again, in the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, he says, building a strong team is both possible and remarkably simple, but it is painfully difficult.
It's like in apartments. Why do you call them apartments when they're all stuck together? It's kind of an oxymoron.
Well,
but it's so true.
It's true.
It's
true.
The tasks, the steps to build a strong team are simple.
Yeah.
But because we're human beings and we're all messy and have baggage and issues and personalities and concerns, it can be at times very painfully difficult.
Yeah.
So Patrick really breaks this down well.
He does. He really does. And I mean, and just my original thought on that, when I read that in the book for the first time, building a strong team is possible and remarkably simple, but it is painfully difficult. Again, I say this often here on the Value Added, so bear with me if I'm just repeating myself to death, but it starts with us, right, as leaders. So we got to be able to filter in, this is painfully difficult, and part of that is because of me. So know your own idiosyncrasies, know your own heart, your own mind, how you process things, how you approach conflict, all those different things. Go back, watch our episode from last week on conflict, kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about. Yeah. But we're going to walk through, I'm actually just going to read the 5 dysfunctions to you, kind of slowly, just to kind of let you process for a second. And then we're going to walk through each of them and kind of just commentate. I don't have really many more quotes from the book to give you. I just simply want Bill and I to talk through these 5 dysfunctions and give you some helpful tips on just how to identify and approach.
And you just before you read them, you can find a handy graphic if you just Google images for the 5 dysfunctions of a team.
Patrick Lencioni.
That just really kind of syncs it up for you.
It does.
But read the book. It's so good. It's
it really
so
is.
Good.
And again, the book is written like his 5. What was the other one?
The Ideal Team Player.
The Ideal Team Player.
Yeah.
Where it's kind of a made up story. That he writes, and each of the characters, has, their own personalities. And then it's really interesting when he does that because you get to see these dysfunctions on the team in the story. And then he goes through
made up, but
they're made up,
but
right.
based on experiences he's had over years and years.
And some of you who read the book, you'll probably be like, "Oh my gosh, that's Nancy. Oh, that's Ted." You're going to be like naming people in your
I hope none of you
team.
are named Nancy or Ted.
I hope hope none of you do that. But even in my mind, I'm like, I wonder who that would be on my team. Stop that. But that is part of that's part of it, is really being able to identify things. So anyway, here are the 5 dysfunctions. Yeah. And then we'll start. So again, a little bit slow. Dysfunction number 1 for a team is absence of trust. The fear of being vulnerable with team members prevents the building of trust within the team. Again, these are Patrick's words. So dysfunction number 1, absence of trust. The fear of being vulnerable with team members prevents the building of trust within the team. Dysfunction number 2 is fear of conflict. Believe it or not, a dysfunction, big one, number 2, is fear of the conflict. The desire to preserve artificial harmony stifles the occurrence of productive ideological conflict. In other words, if you fear the conflict, you'll never go through what we would call, what Patrick calls, the ideal conflict that's necessary for growth.
Healthy conflict.
Healthy conflict. Yeah. So the dysfunction number 1, absence of trust. Dysfunction number 2, fear of conflict. Dysfunction number 3 is a lack of commitment. So the lack of clarity or buy-in prevents team members from making decisions they will stick to. Okay, so that's number 3, lack of commitment. Patrick goes on to say, dysfunction number 4 is avoidance of accountability. The need to avoid interpersonal discomfort prevents team members from holding one another accountable for their behaviors and their performance. Right? So avoidance of accountability. Accountability shouldn't just come from the leader to his, the team he's leading. Yeah. Right? He is part of the team, but accountability should flow parallel in side to side.
As well as vertical backup between
backup.
The leader and the rest of the team and vice versa.
Avoidance of accountability. And dysfunction number 5 is inattention to results. So he says the pursuit of individual goals and personal status erodes the focus on collective success. So those are the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Absence of trust, fear of conflict, lack of commitment, avoidance of accountability, and inattention to results.
So we were talking about this earlier, and I asked you this question. I'm going to ask it again.
Sure, go for it.
So, Jared, what do you do to build trust when you go into a team?
It's simple. Get to know your people. That's really what I do. I feel that the deeper I know the individuals on the team, the more trust we build, which obviously is the dysfunction number 1, which is what the period is built on. And for me, that's probably a 5, 6, 7 to 10 step process, but I could probably boil it down to 3. Step number 1 is just getting to know them on a personal level. What is it that makes them tick? What are their hobbies? Who do they hang around with? It's just
what are they passionate about?
What are they passionate about? Just simple, basic questions. And as you get to know them, you find that common ground. Sometimes you got to dig hard, but sometimes it's like right there on the surface level. You didn't even know. Oh, dude, you love baseball? Dude, I love baseball. How are the Red Sox doing? Because that's the only MLB team that matters. Sorry if you're not from New England. Right? New England teams are the bomb. So just sports and things of that nature, whatever that may be, identifying that. And really, I think the third thing what flows naturally from doing this, getting to know people and identifying things you have in common, that third thing is just being involved more so than in the workplace. So really what I mean by that is you are showing an interest not only in what they can bring to the team, but what you can bring to them as an individual, right? And the best way to do that is just building friendships. And again, you can't be everybody's best friend, especially if you're running a big team. But you can show attention to somebody's personhood on a personal level. And Bill's got many stories of this. I've got many stories. I think of when I'm working with a team and one of their kids has a ball game. Like, go to the ball game if you had the opportunity. Go be involved in their personal life if you have that opportunity. And again, you don't have to be best friends. You don't have to go fishing every Saturday.
Maybe you can't stay for the whole game, but go for a half hour.
Yeah.
Make yourself known and go over and talk and then excuse yourself. You got places to be, but that shows effort and intention.
And there's stories of CEOs of, billion-dollar corporations that do this. Yeah. They just walk the beat. They walk the floor. They come in and they're like, oh my gosh, he's here or she's here. It's like, God stepped into the building, right? And when they just, hey, how's it going? Thanks for being here today. And it's those things. So for me, I build trust by getting to know people, and then trying my best to show a care for who they are and being involved with them. So,
yeah, and I'll answer my own.
Yeah, I was gonna say flip the question.
Answer my own question. Yeah, I kind of break this down into a very basic process and find common ground. Mm-hmm. As Jared mentioned, you love baseball. I love baseball too. That's common ground. Find common ground. One time I was meeting with an employee virtually, and they had a picture of their pet dog as their background in the meeting. And I'm like, oh, you got a dog. What kind of, and I just went off on some excitement because I knew that would be common because I have 2 dogs. And so we spent talking about dogs for about 5 or 6 minutes before we got into the heart of the meeting. And I was in. I mean, I had their trust after that point. They knew I cared about them and who they were and what they valued. And when we met up again, we just continued that conversation. It was really nice. So common ground is huge. Respect is number 2. Respect offered is potential for respect earned. Whether you disagree, whether you click with this person magically right away, or you're just like, this person's so different from me, I don't know. Offer respect, because respect is potential for respect earned.
Yes, very much so.
And that will be a safety net in a lot of places and in experiences as you may need to interact with this individual, correct them, motivate them. And then number 3 is demonstrating you actually care about them. Not just what they bring to the table, not the numbers, their metrics, how they're going to move the business goals forward, but you care about them. And as Jared mentioned earlier, just get to know them. Know their stories, their passions, who they are, what they do, why they do it. Take notes. Yeah. Don't tell them you're taking notes, but take notes. In one place of employment, the manager 2 levels up for me likes to go around and meet with all managers in the department and just get to know them. And once a quarter, I get a meeting with this upper manager person, and recently had a meeting with them, and they remembered my wife's name and my kids' names. And
it's a big deal.
And I'm like, oh snap, they paid attention.
Yeah.
I mean, this is impressive. And
really is.
Remembered my kids, school they went to and how they're doing, asked how they were doing, and made a world of difference. So for me, it's a simple formula: common ground, respect, and actually just showing you care about them. They're great ways, small steps to build trust. And that may be a process over a couple of months and several meetings. If you do regular one-on-one meetings with your direct reports, or you just have a weekly team meeting, stay after the meeting, do the water cooler talk, just ask questions and learn about them.
And I would even add, sometimes going the extra mile for them. You have a team member who, you're trying to build trust with, maybe they come up short on something, and maybe you fill the gap. Maybe you come in and just do it. And, they come back in, the next day, and they're like, they go to try to play catch up, and they realize it's done, and you've left a little note. Hey, took care of this for you. Hope you have a great day. Like, that's so much more powerful than, hey, why didn't you get this done? Why did you leave 5 minutes early? Why weren't you here? Why were you here 5 minutes late? Maybe just trying to go the extra mile every once in a while to see the response you get, from doing that. Most people are used to, managers and bosses who will come down, like a rain of fire, and, you left 5 minutes earlier, you didn't get this done, and, you get called in the office. But what if you call them in the office and, hey, I noticed this was, didn't get done. I took care of it. Don't worry about it.
Are you okay?
Yeah, are you doing all right? Was there a reason you were a few minutes late? I'm not going to reprimand you or anything. Just want to make sure you're good. You're ready to go. And when you've gone the extra mile, and then you ask, hey, how you doing? That's a powerful relational builder and an opportunity to build some serious trust. Yeah,
this is not a perfect analogy, but when I used to be a youth pastor, and one of the things they taught us in youth pastor school, and yes, there's a youth pastor school,
youth pastor seminary,
is that when you go into a church, you have these kind of chips, right? And as you do things for people, you earn chips, and when you ask something from them, you have to pay out chips. Yeah. Kind of, virtual, mental kind of.
It's a good word picture.
To get a word picture of, how the dynamics of the relationships can work. But to Jared's point, when you're doing things for people and building that, you're earning a lot of points with them. Mm-hmm. That will probably take you further. Those individual points will take you further on per point basis rather than just going up and, hey, we need to do this, let's go. Yeah. Pouring into them and showing you care and doing things for them.
And if you can be on the floor, that's another thing that I often tell leaders. If you can be on the floor with them, that's huge. Sometimes we're up in our ivory towers or in our at-home offices or whatever, and that's great, grand, and wonderful. But if you have opportunities, and you should take opportunities to be doing what they're doing on a pretty regular basis, go and do that. I know a lot of the, you leaders who are kind of your front line in a sense of you're new to the game, or, you're not leading a, $1 billion, industry or anything like that, but you're out there, managing the team at the restaurant, on the site of construction, the factory floor, and you're listening to this podcast, and you have a chance to go, cover for someone to run a machine, or, jump into the excavator and, give your guy a break or whatever. He needs a half a day, go and step in. Like, that's building trust, and that's building the rewards of that are going to be huge for you. Your team's going to want to go the extra mile. They're going to want to come in on a Saturday morning to get something done that's in a pinch.
Yeah, one day, my dad used to work for a company, and the building was on a Air Force base. They weren't a military company by stretch of the means, but they're just located there. And you had to have a badge and get in through the gate, and there was military personnel there to wave you through and let you through if you had your badge. And one time over Thanksgiving break, my dad brought us in to show us his workplace and who was on gate duty. Well, it was the colonel. It wasn't the private or the sergeants or any of the, I don't know all the. Sorry if you're in the Air Force, I don't know all the ranks properly, but it was one of the senior officers that was took on gate duty so his people could have it off.
Yeah.
So that's a big deal.
So trust, that's the number one dysfunction of a team, because people don't know how to build and hold on to trust.
And we spent a little time on that one because it's the first one and it's foundational.
It is.
Think
It's
of
huge.
These different 5 dysfunctions as a pyramid, and we want to have a good firm foundation to move forward. So and that brings us to conflict or fear of conflict.
Yeah, the fear of conflict is a big deal. I mean, go back, please, if you have a chance, listen to our latest episode from last week, on conflict resolution. But the fear of conflict, as Patrick puts it, is the desire to preserve artificial harmony. It'll stifle the occurrence of productive ideological conflict. And really that's a fancy way of saying people just don't know how to deal with conflict. There's a fear of it.
Yeah.
I don't want to get involved with this. This is going to be terrible.
Well, let's be honest. Conflict is hard. It's emotional. It can be a very, a roller coaster ride emotionally if not done correctly.
Right.
But if you start with trust and you build a strong foundation, Jared and I can disagree. Jared and I have different viewpoints on different things, but it hasn't stopped us from just sharing our different viewpoints and talking through them. And that's what we're talking about, that the relationship is strong enough within your team. And it doesn't have to be buddy, super, close with everybody, but it has to be well enough that that the person across the table from you has the best interest of the team first and foremost rather than themselves. And we'll come back to that in a little bit. But that opens the door just to share different opinions. And maybe that's a better way to phrase this than conflict. Because you're just working out what's the best idea for the organization and how do we refine, or maybe there's an idea and it gets refined as you go around the table and, that was my idea. Now it's nothing like my idea, but it's better. It's,
and sometimes the conflict isn't as big a deal as we make it out to be.
It's not.
And that, but then that's why Patrick pens this as fear of conflict, because conflict in and of itself is not a bad thing. In fact, we can grow so much from conflict. I know for even in my marriage, not agreeing with my wife on everything is actually grown us closer, not further apart. But we were also taught how to have healthy disagreements. And so that's super, super important that we're able to, hey, I have a level of trust with you. I can totally disagree with you and tell you that that's a stupid idea without offending you. Right? Because we already know we really do trust each other. And we're at that level. And so then conflict becomes a little less fearful.
Yeah, and that fear can play mind games. I can remember more than once, unfortunately, I'll be out mowing my lawn and I'm like, I got to talk to this person because of this. And when I talk to them about this, they're going to say that. And when they say that, I'm going to have to respond like this. And when I respond like this, they're going to say that.
Then I'm going to punch them in the nose.
Really go off and this is going to happen. And that just the fear just kind of builds up. And then you go into the conversation and you go, oh, that wasn't
bad at all.
As bad at all. I thought it was going to be. And the fear can really magnify and inflate what we think may or may not happen in the conflict.
Yes.
And it's just a matter, it's easier to say than do, but, controlling those thoughts. Just because you have a thought doesn't mean you need to agree with it.
Right.
So I heard a counselor once say it's, the acronym TEA.
Oh, yes.
Like the drink.
Yeah.
Thoughts lead to emotions. Emotions lead to action. So TEA. So the more we can kind of take control of our thoughts and guide them where they need to be. It's like, no, I don't know he's going to say that. I need to wait and have the conversation on how he's going to react and handle it in person.
Learn how to brew your tea.
Yeah, exactly. Because that leads towards the emotions and the actions.
So yeah, I mean, what happens when you have a absence of trust leads to fear of conflict, which definitely leads to a lack of commitment.
Absolutely.
And lack of commitment, as Patrick pens it, he says, the lack of clarity or buy-in, meaning your team is bought into this idea or whatever, this prevents team members from making decisions they're going to stick to.
Yeah.
So,
and I think the secret to that is making sure everybody has a say and making sure that they felt heard in their say about whatever you're talking about at the time.
right.
Because you're more likely to get buy-in from someone once they've they got their peace of mind out there. Hey, I really think it should be done this way. This is why. This is what I think is going to happen if we don't do it this way. And you let everybody in the table have their say, and then you come to an agreement of the next step, the action, the direction you're going to go. And if that person is like, well, it's nothing like what I said it's going to be, but all right, I'll go with it. Just opening that door to make them feel heard and understood, as we talked about in the last episode, you're going to get more buy-in from them in an area that they don't agree with than if you would just say, this is the way we're going to do it.
And sometimes, this whole idea of absence of trust and fear of conflict and, this lack of commitment, when you were just talking about that for a second, Bill, I kept thinking through this whole idea of brainstorming. So when you talk about people feeling heard and understood, sometimes somebody will come in, or the procedure, the process, or this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, and then they ask for everybody's individual opinion and thoughts on it. You end up taking that idea and refining it, or taking that idea, throwing it out the window, and now you got a better one.
Yep.
Because a lot of times more minds on something is better than one.
Yeah.
And so
absolutely.
you have to understand too that sometimes the lack of commitment you may be experiencing may be due to the fact that you or your organization or your leader or whatever it is just saying this is going to be the way or the highway, right? This way or the highway, this is the only way we're going to do this. Well, now you're obviously going to have a lack of commitment and buy-in from your team because nobody feels like they're part of the team.
Yeah.
So this is it's kind of reiteration almost of some of our episodes and points we've made, but it's so crucial to understand that if you don't want to have the dysfunction of a lack of commitment, people got to be included.
Yeah.
It's just, you have to. Yeah. And brainstorming is huge for that. Yeah. I think, and this is a silly little example, but the Avengers movie, I think it was, where Thor is in the gladiator ring, and then he sees the Hulk. Okay. Remember that scene?
Yeah.
And they had been separated for a while.
Yeah.
And he's yelling up at him, and he says, trying to tell Loki that I know him. The guy, he's a friend from work. That line came from a kid who was in the audience.
He was visiting, on set visiting. And they asked him, what do you think? And he said, I think you should just say he's a friend. And they got into the movie. That's right. It was a Thor movie.
Yeah, that was one of the Thor movie. Yeah, that was one of the favorite lines. It was my favorite line in the movie. He's a friend from work. It was awesome. But it came from the least expected place. Yeah. And sometimes that happens when you brainstorm.
Yeah, that's a great example.
Yeah. So just understanding absence of trust, fear of conflict, lack of commitment, and then dysfunction number 4, avoidance of accountability. This is a tough one because Patrick says it like this: the need to avoid interpersonal discomfort prevents team members from holding one another accountable for their behaviors and their performance. So if I have a need to avoid interpersonal conflicts with you, we're on the same team, I don't want those interpersonal discomfort for that to happen. I don't like that, right? That's going to prevent you and I from actually holding each other accountable to our, for our own behaviors, but also for our performance and what we're bringing to the team. If I can't go to you and say, hey, Bill, look, I notice you're kind of slacking, you're not bringing enough to this team. How do we work together?
Yeah.
If I don't have the connection with you to do that, or you to do that with me because you don't want that discomfort, and you're afraid of what I might say, and I mean that's a problem.
I was helping a friend who's a race director. He manages and runs marathons, half marathons, and we were setting up a race, and one of the other volunteers and I got into a topic that we both really enjoyed for a moment, and we got distracted. And he shouted over, it's like, hey, it's really nice that you can sit around and have a nice conversation, but we do have a race. I'm like, you're right. We do. I'm so sorry. We'll take this offline to a different time.
Yeah.
And we got our butts back to work because we really did get distracted. And he was fully right to call me out. And I had no problem with him calling me out because he was a close friend and I knew he cared about me. So, yeah.
I remember going through a time where I had a foreman at the time. I really respected this guy. He was wonderful to work with and to be under his authority on the framing crew. We used to frame houses and used to frame commercial buildings. And I remember we got out of the truck after lunch, out of the van, and we went back to work. We're going back to work, and he heard us up in one of the rooms, joking around as we were going back, and he took it upon himself to have a moment where he, kind of yelled at us and cussed at us, a little bit. And I remember what had happened vividly. I had been joking around for 2 minutes as we were supposed to be getting back to work, and then I had bent down to take a rock out of my boot before I put my nail bags on. And it was at that moment that I was taking the rock out of my boot that he exploded. I say exploded. He just sternly told us to get our butts, back to work. And I remember leaning over the rail and just giving it right back to him. Like, you bleepity bleep, and, just yelled at him and cussed at him. And he kind of walked away. And then when we got in the truck to go home, I always rode in the passenger seat, and he kind of looked at me and goes, "Hey, you all right?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine. You all right?" And he's like, "I'm fine," because what was that? And I said, "Don't ever yell at me like that again." So I bring a lot to this team. Like, don't do that, right? And we had this moment of like serious beef. And he goes, "Oh, I just want to make sure you're." But I learned a lot in that moment. He didn't, report me and want to fire me. He actually asked if I was going to be all right.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot. I was like, wow, that's, I totally had an off moment. I should have said, "Hey, sorry, we'll get right back to work. My bad." Because I knew the kid. I knew he had our best interest in at heart and stuff. So I had a moment of weakness, but he had a moment of strength. And so learning that, we had that ability not to avoid the accountability.
And it's important. Jared's an accountability partner of mine. I have 2 others at work are accountability partners for life and leadership. They have full permission to ask me, are you treating your wife well? Are you treating your kids well? Do you have their best interests in mind?
Right.
And all those deep, serious life questions, as well as, are you performing at work? Are you doing all you can to apply yourself? Are you bringing your A game?
Sure.
All those questions are open the table. But we have that, and they have permission to do that because they have my trust. We're not afraid of the conflict. We're committed to one another individually to help us grow and be better in what we do.
Therefore, there's accountability.
So therefore, there is an open door for an accountability. It's a lot easier.
Yeah.
If you don't have those previous stages of the pyramid, it sounds scary. It really sounds hard, and it is. But it takes time to build that.
Yeah.
And
then number 5, the 5th dysfunction, Patrick Lencioni, he says dysfunction number 5 is inattention to results. Your team, individuals on your team may have an inattention to results. The pursuit of individual goals, Patrick says, and personal status erodes the focus of collective success. This is something we've cut down like 4 of these trees already.
Yeah,
we've actually built we've built a house with this already in this podcast. But the pursuit of individual goals and personal status erodes the focus of collective. I love the way he says that.
I do. He words it really, really well. And again, I'm going to say it again. Go get the book. Even though we've covered all 5, there's much more depth to these in the book. Right. The example he provides is awesome. But in my mind, what comes down to this last step is ego. It's really about personal ego. Am I looking... Maxwell defines success as adding value to myself. Significance is adding value to others. Right? So my idea is the best idea. What I want to accomplish is the best way to go. My core in the business is the most important core in the business. I'm in marketing, so marketing is the most important. If we don't market, we're not going to get sales.
Right.
Well, I'm a salesman. If I'm not bringing in clients, and your marketing really doesn't matter, does it? Or
I'm more important than you.
Yeah, or production. Hey, we're making the product for you to sell. If you don't have a product, you can't do. So there's this whole set of egos that can be involved. And one way I like to say is, where you stand all depends on where you sit. Go sit in someone else's chair for a while. take the time to go visit other departments, learn about their role and what they bring to the table, right? To that project, to that event, to that volunteer group, right? Gain understanding from their perspective, walk a mile in their shoes, as we like to say, brings clarity and helps diffuse my own prejudice, arrogance, pride, and then just helps me to remember I need to value people more than my opinion of the situation.
This is so funny to me because you don't have to go much further than entertainment to see this. And by entertainment, I mean like movies or television series, whatever you want to call it. This whole idea, the pursuit of individual goals, that's what good movies are made of. It's this crisis where the guy who's supposed to be in charge has a moment and starts looking at personal gain rather than the gain of those he's, trying to save on the ship or whatever the storyline may be. You see this all the time. Whatever it is, the superhero says, I'm done. I'm going to go pursue my own thing. And everything hits all the relationships, all the poop hits the fan. That's what good entertainment is made of. And so you see it
Drama.
Conflict and drama. But it usually stems from one or two people or three people saying, I'm going to put myself above or my agenda or my department or my goals, my personal gain. We could go a lot with the personal gain one, but you see this happen all the time. And it's almost too obvious that when this happens, it's a serious dysfunction.
Very much so. Yeah.
But any final thoughts, Bill, just to kind of wrap this up? The 5 dysfunctions again: absence of trust, fear of conflict, lack of commitment, avoidance of accountability, and inattention to results.
I think the best place to start is to evaluate your team, see where you are, but irregardless, reinforce that foundation of trust. Start there.
Trust.
I think that's going to move you naturally through the next 5 levels. Yeah. I mean, you got to be aware of them and what they are and be a little intentional towards moving towards them. But man, having trust, that covers a lot of territory.
It really does.
So,
and get the book and read it. And thank you, Patrick, if you happen to come across our humble podcast. And thank you so much for this resource in this book. Yeah. And again, thank you for joining us, for listening. Let us know how helpful this was for you. Drop a comment, like, share, subscribe, whatever else we're supposed to say at the end of our show. And again,
no one asked us to cover this book. We're not being paid to cover this book. Patrick,
but you could if you wanted to.
Yeah. Patrick doesn't know. We want to bring things to you that are value.
Exactly.
That's the name of the podcast.
Whether that's ours or whether there's some material out there, we're going to be honest and we're going to use somebody else's and comment on it and share our personal experience with it because it's valuable.
Yeah. So once again, thanks for your time. We appreciate you. We'd love to hear from you. Drop us a comment, send us an email, influence@thevalueaddedpodcast.com. Let us know your thoughts. Take care.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.